This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Airstrike hits capital of Ethiopia's Tigray for a second time this week. Russia hosts Taliban in Moscow for talks on humanitarian aid and the future of Afghanistan. And from garbage to music, how a music band in the DRC is crafting garbage into musical instruments. This is Africa Live. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up within the hour. In business, we'll tell you about Egypt, which returns to the JP Morgan Emerging Markets Government Bond Index after 10 years. Plus, the West African nation discuss ways to revive the tourism sector. We begin the hour in Ethiopia, where government airstrikes have hit the Tigrayan capital, Mekelle, for the second time this week. An army spokesman confirmed Wednesday's strike targeted facilities where Tigrayan forces repair armaments. The Tigray People's Liberation Front said the move showed the government's desperation and disregard for civilians. No casualties have been reported so far. This week's strikes come after a fresh military offensive was launched against Tigrayan forces who have been fighting Ethiopian government and allied forces for nearly a year. The conflict has left thousands dead and over 2 million displaced. Girum Chala now joins us live from Addis Ababa with an update on that. Girum, it's the second time this week airstrikes by government forces have been reported in Mekelle. Can you tell us more? All right, I'm afraid we have lost Girum, but we'll try and reconnect with him in a short while. Even before the latest flare-up, aid agencies had been warning of the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the country. Earlier, we spoke to a senior analyst from International Crisis Group, William Davison, about the implications on aid delivery. Take a listen.
It's a bad sign that there's about to be no shift in the sort of political approach to the dispute, therefore continuation of conflict from both sides. They try and seek an advantage, and then also this new factor of airstrikes on urban areas inside Tigray, because at the moment, most of the fighting is outside Tigray and Amhara region, where the Tigray forces have gone on the offensive, and I think as long as those military dynamics are in place, it does not look likely. And in fact, the government was quite explicit this week that they're going to keep this sort of blockade on Tigray whilst the fighting continues. So it does not look good, unfortunately. Everything, it is a blockade, hugely constricted aid flows, trade, also the cutoff of basic services for the region. So the banking services, the power services, telecommunication services. So people are running out of food, people are running out of cash. There's no fuel for aid operations. There's very little medicine at the hospitals. So really, you name it, there is a shortage. It's already believed to be causing significant excess death. And as I said, because of the dynamics surrounding the conflict and likelihood of further fighting and the government's approach in terms of this blockade to Tigray, the situation is set to get worse and could threaten the lives of hundreds of thousands of people ultimately.
Well, let's try and reconnect with CGTN's Girum Chala, who is live for us in Addis Ababa. Hopefully, Girum, you can hear me this time.
Yes.
Girum?
Well, Peninah, as you have said, this is the second time that the Ethiopian government has launched another airstrike in the Tigrayan capital of Mekelle. They are saying that strategic locations which belong to the rebel group, such as places like warehouses where they are accumulating weapons and also repair warehouses. At the same time, another attack against the training sector, what is called a training center, has been held in Mekelle city today. This airstrike, by the way, is part of what is called a final offensive against the Tigray forces, Peninah. So the airstrike has been held and the government has confirmed it was a successful airstrike against the TPLF strategic locations.
Are there reports of any casualties from today's hit?
Well, so far, the Tigray television is the source that we can refer to at the moment, and it's been showing people who were wounded, saying that they've been, casualties, or they've been wounded because of the airstrike held today. But we cannot really verify this from actual source or TPLF leadership themselves or the Ethiopian National Defense Force. But the Ethiopian National Defense Force and also authorities here, communication authorities, have been telling us that this airstrike was held after a long time study and a thorough understanding of what's happening on the ground, and after a long-standing reconnaissance work, according to them, to avoid any human casualty, any civilian casualties. And they are saying that whatever information coming out affecting civilians is just a false information. That's according to the Ethiopian National Defense Force and the authorities here. But all in all, in general terms, the continuation of the war in the three regions, Tigray, Afar, and the Amhara regional state, is still affecting people. The humanitarian situation still is dire and needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And we can confirm that war has continued even today and is expected to continue, unfortunately, tomorrow as well, Peninah.
We appreciate that update. Thank you, Gurum. Gurum Chala live in Addis Ababa. Russia has hosted the Taliban for talks in Moscow. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov addressed the attendees, which included a high-profile Taliban delegation and diplomats from 10 countries, including China and Pakistan. The U.S. was absent from that meeting, but said it plans to attend in the future. Earlier, we talked with Julia Chapman in Moscow.
The talks have just gotten underway in the building behind me, with 10 countries involved as well as members of the Taliban. And we've heard introductory remarks from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who says it's time to mobilize international aid to Afghanistan to prevent a humanitarian crisis and a big flow of migration. That's something that Russia is certainly concerned about. He said that he welcomed the steps the Taliban has taken to stabilize the political and military situation in the country. And he had some critical words for the former government of Afghanistan, which he said had let down the people. But really what's on the agenda at these talks is trying to find a common approach to the future of Afghanistan, with all the regional powers involved, looking at creating a more inclusive government and, of course, preventing a humanitarian crisis.
We call on the Taliban movement, and we've just discussed it with the honored delegation, to strictly follow the line of not letting someone use Afghanistan against the interests of other countries. First of all, of course, against neighboring countries, Central Asian states, our friends and allies.
What's not clear yet is whether there will be any actual financial aid offered to the Taliban, which is an organization that not all of these countries involved actually recognize as being the legitimate government of Afghanistan.
Kenya has lifted a nationwide curfew that has been in place since March last year to curb the spread of COVID-19. President Uhuru Kenyatta, while making the announcement, said infection cases had fallen to less than 5% positivity rate. Kenya's Ministry of Health data shows the country has recorded over 252,000 infections and over 5,000 deaths since the pandemic erupted. The East African nation, with a population of 54 million, has received 7.5 million COVID-19 vaccine doses so far, with 4.5 million people having gotten at least one dose. President Kenyatta urged all Kenyans to continue to adhere to the COVID-19 regulations.
And therefore, given the progress in containing this disease, the committee, jointly with the Council, has recommended a review of the existing containment measures. Accordingly, the number of persons gathering for in-person worship is now reviewed upwards from 1/3 of the congregants to 2/3, provided they adhere to all the health protocols. In the same regard, and by the authority vested in me as President, I hereby order and direct that the nationwide dusk to dawn curfew that has been in effect from the 27th of March 2020 be and is hereby vacated with immediate effect.
Algeria has also announced a full lift of its nationwide lockdown imposed on 23 provinces amid a drop in COVID-19 cases. The Prime Minister's office, in a statement, said the decision takes effect from Wednesday for 21 days. Algerian health authorities on Monday reported 78 new infections, a drop from 87 cases a day before. Gatherings such as weddings and sit-ins in the streets and public places remain banned under the country's pandemic measures. The government has also urged citizens to get inoculated against COVID-19. In September, Algeria started the production of COVID-19 vaccines as part of a joint venture with China's Sinovac firm.
The number of infected people has decreased a lot in Algeria, and many have also taken the vaccine. Therefore, in my opinion, the risk of the epidemic has weakened considerably, and this decision means we're moving towards definitively turning the black page of the coronavirus.
I advise all Algerians to be careful because despite the government's decision to lift the lockdown, we risk to face a new wave. The virus has claimed many lives.
11 minutes into the hour, this is Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up. Mali asks Muslim body to open peace talks with Al-Qaeda's local affiliate. And Libya struggles to find peace 10 years after Gaddafi's death.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's head to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the death toll from a boat accident in the Congo River has risen to 61. The accident occurred more than a week ago. Authorities in the northwest Mongala province said 39 people were rescued. More than 100 people were estimated to be on board the makeshift vessel that was traveling at night. Officials say the accident may have been caused by overcrowding aggravated by bad weather. Boat accidents in the DRC are common, and passengers often do not wear life jackets. Mali's government says it has asked the country's main Islamic body to open peace talks with leaders of Al-Qaeda's local affiliate. This, according to Mali's Minister of Religious Affairs, is in a bid to end a decade of conflict. Malian authorities have in the past endorsed the idea of talks and quietly backed local peace initiatives with militants. The security situation has continued to deteriorate, and insurgent groups expanded beyond their traditional strongholds. The latest announcement by the Religious Affairs Ministry, though, marks the most concrete step towards negotiations with militant leaders so far. But the approach is vigorously opposed by Mali's chief military ally, France. French President Emmanuel Macron in June said troops would not conduct joint operations with countries that negotiate with militants. Earlier, we spoke to David Otto, Director for Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies, for more insights on the matter.
This is a very important step, and I think we should move away from the 19th and 20th century talk about we don't talk to terrorists. We see that that doesn't work in principle. But it's not just engaging with these so-called militants or Al-Qaeda related terrorists that is important. Mali has tried that after the revolts in 1963, 1991, 2006, and 2012. And they have constantly, come up with solutions that have not been able to be sustainable, neither have they been implemented. So I think what is more important is to be able to identify those who are not hardliners and those who might be moderate and willing to talk, so that, they can reach the long-standing divide, as you much know, between the North and the South. I think that the biggest problem is the manipulation and, the meddling of international and regional states within Mali. So, for example, in the northern part, you've got, the Tuaregs and the Arabs that are, seen as the troublemakers, whereas the Songais and the Fulani northern people are seen as a lot more moderate. So it's left to see how this political divide can be appreciated in any upcoming talks, how the religious, the economic, the social, and the traditional differences can be, balanced by the Bamako government, to reach a peaceful negotiation.
Today marks the 10th anniversary of the death of former Libyan President Muammar al-Gaddafi. NATO airstrikes targeted Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. Rebels then captured Gaddafi and killed him before he could be put on trial. A decade after his killing, Libya is on the path towards peace, but the country remains polarized, and a planned election scheduled to be held on December 24th faces many hurdles. Adel Mahroui tells us more.
Over a decade ago, popular protests broke out against President Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in February 2011, as people demanded an end to his 4-decade rule. But unlike in Libya's neighbors, Egypt and Tunisia, where leaders responded to the uprising by stepping aside, Gaddafi fought back to assert his control. 8 months later, NATO-backed rebels captured the Libyan president near his hometown of Sirte, but instead of putting him on trial, they killed him.
His death was that of an unjust ruler. It should not have happened that way. Ideally, he should have been put on trial. We should have understood how he managed Libya, where his finances were hidden. What had he done during his 4 decades in power? It's why chaos followed, because he controlled everything.
It took Libya almost 10 years to end the fighting and enjoy the longest ceasefire the country has seen since the fall of Gaddafi. The truce, however, remains fragile. There are concerns that foreign fighters and mercenaries who are scattered across Libya could threaten any possible political solution.
Now, Libyans see it as their right to carry arms and fight the foreign fighters in their country. They will revolt and raise their voice, no matter what the West says. I don't think Libya will recover soon. The NATO invaders who attacked Libya with airstrikes for 8 months still want to control the country.
The UN, the AU and regional powers are trying to push Libyans towards holding an election in December. It's not clear who voters in the North African nation will elect, but the aspirations of Libyans are not a secret.
Libyans want to go back to the pre-2011 country. If the people had had the liberty to choose their leadership and parliament, they would have completed the task within a year. Libya before 2011 was a developing nation. There was no terrorism. It was a leading economy in Africa.
Libya suffered after Gaddafi because he didn't create independent state institutions. He didn't create a foundation for the rule of law. Before he died, he swore to bring destruction upon his people. He ordered his supporters to arm themselves against the uprising. The population was growing without control. Unemployment rates were spiking. Libya was ranked 135th in the world in terms of education quality, and it was among the top in corruption ranking.
Libyans want the security and the stability that Gaddafi provided, but they also want a well-structured country that relies on the entire nations instead of just one man. The North African nation appears to be reaching peace with its past. One of Gaddafi's sons, Saadi, has been released from detention, while his elder brother, Saif al-Islam, may run in the upcoming elections. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's bring in Mohammed Hussein, a professor of political science at Cairo University. He joins us live from Cairo. Thank you very much, Professor Hussein, for joining us. So, Muammar Gaddafi's death was expected to usher in an era of democracy or stability in Libya. To what extent has this been achieved?
Well, 10 years now have passed since Gaddafi disappeared from the scene, and yet the Libyans are not able to reconcile with themselves. And I think that the Libyans should go ahead with the elections foreseen to take place at the end of December this year, and they shouldn't worry about the conferences, which the one will be held on Thursday in Libya or the one proposed for the 12th of November in Paris. I don't think these occurrences are going to help the Libyans. The only way to help the Libyans achieve their own consolidated democracy and the consolidated government is to kick away the mercenaries, to get rid of Daesh, which appeared nowadays in the southern area of Libya near Chad, and they seem to be very comfortable, and to go ahead with the elections which are going to take place in the end of December. And this only, through this only, Libya can reach a stable government and reconcile all the warring factions that they are not able to agree with one another from 2011 until 2021. This 10 years, 1 decade has passed. I call it the decade of trouble in Libya, and that trouble is going to be exacerbated if the Libyans are not able to take the chance and reconcile with themselves.
Now, you mentioned the elections that are due to be held in December. Is the country ready to hold that election?
The elections are called by the people are trying to postpone the elections, and I don't think it is in the best interest of Libya or the Libyan people to postpone these elections. It is the only shred of light with which the Libyans can emerge victorious if they are able to reconcile and get rid of the troubles between themselves. If they do postpone the elections, I think Libya is going to sink again in the quagmire which has been going on since 2011.
Professor Mohammed Hussein, thank you very much for joining us. The United Nations says climate change is to blame for the worst floods to hit parts of South Sudan in nearly 60 years. The country's representative for the UN's refugee agency says over 700,000 people have been affected, with the numbers rising daily. The rains are expected to continue for the rest of the year, increasing the need for aid. According to the UN agency, 3 years of consecutive floods have eroded people's ability to cope. The UN is also warning that as people head for higher ground, the likelihood of conflict between communities increases.
We've seen houses submerged, people wading through water, and infrastructure damaged. The floods are a reality. This is the 21st century, and we have spoken to people who've said they have not seen flooding like this since 1962. What we would like to do as an international community, and what we must do, is support the efforts of the people and the government of South Sudan to combat climate change and to see how to make the lives of people better and more hopeful.
Uganda has received additional 700,000 doses of Sinovac COVID-19 vaccines as a donation from China. The first shipment of 300,000 doses was donated in July. The vaccines will be given to teachers who have been waiting for their second doses. Isabel Nakiria reports.
China says the donation is part of the global effort to have equitable distribution of vaccines to developing countries. China has pledged to provide 2 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses to the world this year.
We hope this batch of vaccines will greatly facilitate the Uganda side's effort in vaccination programs, and hope more people will benefit from these donations.
Uganda's Ministry of Health says the addition of 700,000 doses are a timely arrival for teachers who are due for their second jabs. It's now a requirement for teachers in Uganda to be vaccinated before they report back to class. The Chinese vaccines were reserved for teachers to increase uptake for a quick reopening of schools. School in Uganda has been closed for almost 2 years due to the pandemic. The government says all 550,000 teachers must be fully vaccinated before schools reopen.
After these doses, there is no excuse why we should have teachers who are not vaccinated, and this takes us steps further to accelerate opening of schools at the appropriate time.
So far, Uganda has fully vaccinated just about 15% of teachers. Primary and secondary schools are scheduled to reopen in January next year. The government says it needs to vaccinate 4.8 million people before it fully reopens for business. About 2.4 million people have been vaccinated so far. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Coming up in business news. Egypt returns to the JP Morgan Emerging Markets Government Bond Index after 10 years. And West African nations discuss ways to revive the tourism sector.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Egypt has finally been allowed back into the JP Morgan Emerging Markets Government Bond Index after a 10-year absence. According to JP Morgan, this step would give access for the government to gain up to $2.4 billion in returns for its local currency bonds market. The North African country had been dismissed from the index due to the economic fallout following the uprising in 2011. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has the story.
Egypt has tried for the last 3 years to rejoin the index after being removed in 2011, and the review by the benchmark specialized in emerging markets government bonds has finally yielded positive results.
The condition to return to the index was to maintain a steady increase in liquidity, with abilities for larger bond issuances. There must be more foreign investments in the bonds, and they need to be issued at longer shelf lives of up to 20 years. This has been met. At this time, we need a strong purchaser of Egyptian bills, and joining JP Morgan will allow for big sales.
Egypt has been aggressively tapping international debt tools as it rebuilds an economy shattered by years of political turmoil. The central bank says external debt has exceeded $134 billion in June 2021, and JP Morgan Index will open the door for more finance.
The issuance of Egyptian treasuries next January will allow Egypt, which has a weight of 1.85% on the index, to receive investments of up to $10 to $12 billion. This amount gives an incentive to the Egyptian economy to sustain the upcoming global volatility and rising inflation. Egypt will be able to keep interest rates stable or even drop slightly without any pressure on the central bank or the foreign exchange rate.
JP Morgan confirmed that Egypt's government bonds in the local currency with a total value of $16 billion are eligible for the index, and the Ministry of Finance has confirmed it will begin with an equivalent $1 billion issuance in early 2022. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
South Sudan's government says it wants to promote the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises in an attempt to kickstart economic recovery in the East African nation. Under the plans, businesses could be offered increased financial support, including loans to help them grow, as well as increase their market access. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Paul Mathiang owns a shop in Juba selling goods to the local community, but with South Sudan's economy in fix, rising inflation rates and a challenging tax system, Paul says the cost of doing business is getting higher and higher.
The taxation people keep coming here. Everyone comes and asks for money, and they are very violent. They even come when you still have valid documents, and they want you to pay again. This is killing our businesses.
With most goods in South Sudan imported, poor exchange rates add an extra financial burden to business owners. There are also no financial institutions currently providing loans to small and medium enterprises in South Sudan.
The dollar is expensive. When you import goods, you spend a lot. That means the goods here will also be expensive for our consumers, but they now can't afford. The business is declining and no one wants to understand this.
Traders also claim they have been stopped on major highways when transporting goods and asked to pay a fee to pass.
COVID-19 and devastating floods are worsening the economic situation and reducing purchasing powers of many here.
South Sudan's government now says it wants to find ways of reducing taxes levied on small and medium enterprises.
The laws of the country are encouraging investment in the country, starting from the constitution of the country, coming to the other regulatory laws. Investment is encouraged by those laws.
The hope is that kind of support will encourage business to grow and help salvage an ailing economy after years of unrest. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
West African countries like Nigeria, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are looking to revive their tourism sector after being hit by COVID-19. Key players gathered in the Nigerian capital for a display of some of their rich cultures and discussions around reviving the tourism industry. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
A display of some of West Africa's rich cultures, from fashion to food, music and dance. Members of the diplomatic corps and stakeholders in the tourism industry all gathered to rub minds on how to revive a sector. It suffered from COVID-induced lockdowns and travel restrictions. Many here believe that Africans must begin to look within to grow the tourism industry.
We notice, sadly, that Africans do not travel within Africa. So we wanted to bring in some element of culture. We started with culinary because really the food are all the same, and with the food we could showcase the different culture. We could take a journey into the different countries.
Nowadays
it's not easy to go to Europe or America where African people used to go for tourism. This is an opportunity to develop tourism among us. We have less level of COVID and we have more resilience in this area. So, and it's an opportunity to let African people to discover the neighboring countries.
Tourism is a significant driver of economic growth in Africa. According to the Economic Outlook report by the African Development Bank, tourism contributed 8.5% to the continent's GDP and employed around 24 million people pre-COVID. With more access to vaccines, the West African countries are seeking more partnerships in tourism to boost their economies.
You cannot develop tourism by only talking. You need actions, you need initiative, you need partnerships. And we are happy to know that in Nigeria there are organizations like the Travels and other touristic operators who will partner with them.
Most of the products you see here, they're from small businesses. And also, as they're starting there, we are having some kind of employment for them. It's a good event for us to integrate and for us to share each other's culture experiences. And I hope that there will be such events on a broader scale with more countries involved.
Africa's rich cultures, wildlife reserves, beaches and much more are attractions to millions of tourists annually. Governments have been renewing their commitment to ease travel within the continent with measures like making visas more affordable to adopting visa on arrival policies. All steps towards boosting the tourism sector. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Digital transformation has become crucial to companies wanting to improve their businesses, and the outbreak of COVID-19 last year actually sped that up. In China, key technologies like 5G and artificial intelligence are being widely used to create new opportunities and industrial patterns, and the application of industrial robots is also on the rise to support the country's high-end manufacturing development. CGTN's Ying Junyi has more.
In many companies like auto parts maker Tongcheng, robots are now key to their production. The company has introduced over 300 robots in its production line since 2017, and they've had a major impact.
Our data shows the robots have improved our welding production line efficiency by 100% compared to manual operations, and our energy consumption has dropped by 40% by using the robots.
Yang says the company plans to introduce more robots in other parts of its production line, including polishing and product handling, so as to meet increasingly higher quality requirements in the automobile industry. Responding to the strong demand for industrial robots in China, many foreign companies have come into the market. With a total investment of 1 billion yuan, Swiss industrial giant ABB's new robotic factory in Shanghai will be put into operation in the first quarter of next year. The company says it will accelerate its expansion into more sectors as the use of industrial robot applications increase.
In the past, industrial robots were mostly sold to the automobile industry. But now, the robots are also in high demand in sectors such as computers, communications and consumer electronics, logistics, food and pharmaceuticals. And the demand is further growing with the development of China's manufacturing sector and the NEV industry.
Shanghai's local government this June spoke once again of the importance of innovation-driven development, launching new guidelines for developing AI technology during the city's 14th five-year plan. Experts say that will create further opportunities for local firms in the city to adopt industrial robotic technology.
Domestic robot companies in Shanghai will be able to get access to the latest technology in the industrial robot sector, as big names in the sector start operation here. And the application of industrial robots is on the rise in the city, and more supportive policies to attract professionals have also been launched here. That will help domestic companies develop core technologies.
The National Bureau of Statistics says China's industrial robot production rose nearly 64% year-on-year to over 230,000 units in the first 8 months of the year. And as one of the biggest robot manufacturing hubs in China, Shanghai has taken the lead with 1/3 of the country's total output. Yingjun Isis for CGTN Shanghai.
Chinese tech giant Alibaba's annual Apsara conference is underway in Hangzhou under the slogan Invent, Explore, Inspire. The 4-day event will showcase many cutting-edge technologies and applications in cloud computing and artificial intelligence. CGTN's Wule takes a closer look.
These smart products wouldn't be so clever without chips playing a decisive role in the performance. Many cutting-edge technologies, including big data and cloud computing, rely on them. That is why many Chinese tech giants spare no efforts in developing high-end chips. Alibaba just unveiled a new processor named Yitian 710, which will be used to power servers in its data centers. This chip is built by the company's chip development business, T-Head.
This chip is the first server processor that is compatible with the latest ARM v9 architecture. Each processor chip has 60 billion integrated transistors. It is powered by 128 ARM cores.
As China attaches more importance to reaching carbon neutrality, improving the energy efficiency of data processing is also a challenge for chip makers.
This is the benefit and advantage brought by our chip's high energy efficiency. From the customer's point of view, a cloud computing customer will obtain the same performance at lowest cost because electricity is also part of the cost.
Besides Alibaba's latest advanced technologies, more than 1,500 new digital and smart products from other tech companies also attracting visitors, broadening people's minds on what the future may look like. Actually, this artificial fish is a kind of underwater robot. It is made up of camera, sensor, battery, and other electronic components, and it can be used in many scenarios.
This kind of underwater robot can be used in many marine projects, such as underwater inspection, as well as underwater terrain surveying and mapping.
This year's exhibition area covers more than 40,000 square meters, with hundreds of companies and institutions aiming to work closer to improve this sector's ecosystem. Wule, CGTN, Hangzhou.
And that's it for now on Africa Live Business. But later on Global Business, Nigeria's headline inflation rate drops to 16.6% in September. I'll have more details on that at the top of the hour at 1800 GMT. But for now, keep it here. I'll be back with more news from the continent, including from garbage to music, the story of a music band in the DRC that's crafting garbage to musical instruments.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
A music band band in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo is becoming well known for performances using instruments collected from garbage heaps. Members of the Fulu Muziki band recycle materials sourced from dumping sites in Kinshasa to produce music that is both entertaining and enlightening. CGTN's Chris Chamringa sent the following report from Kinshasa.
Rummaging for objects dumped in Kinshasa's landfills has become a matter of routine for this group of Congolese. They are members of Kinshasa's Fulu Muziki group. The group recycles objects from trash sites that litter the DRC capital to make musical instruments.
I really like doing things that are unique. Fulu Muziki is a new idea in our music industry. We want to show people that some of the things they throw away in garbage heaps can be transformed and put to good use.
The band's name, Fulu Muziki, literally means music made from garbage. Scrap metal and other kinds of discarded material are all that the band members of Fulu Muziki need to produce sounds. The Pan-African messages in their songs have appealed to many people in the continent. The band stages energetic performances with sounds from saucepans, spoons, plastic pipes, and other recycled objects. The artists have performed in concerts in Europe with their unique instruments. The group was started in 2003 by Ewango Mabende, who's better known by his stage name Pisco Crane.
When we started singing, we used to collect objects from garbage sites to produce sounds because we couldn't afford to buy musical instruments. Our neighborhood had a lot of trash. That's how I got the idea of forming a band that plays music using material collected from garbage sites. I believe in artistic liberation.
Aisha Kanyeba is the only woman in the group. She joined in 2016 and has never looked back.
J'ai grandi à la scène de néo-apostolique, musique gospel.
I started my career by singing gospel music in church. I later on decided to shift to urban music. I met many musicians who advised me to listen to rhythms from different musical instruments. I eventually chose to join this group that recycles material to make music which has a universal appeal.
The DRC capital has a poor waste disposal system, but members of the Fulu Muziki band have chosen to do something about it. They have turned discarded objects from trash sites into musical instruments that entertain, and they hope they're educating people about the need to keep their city clean. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Next week marks the birthday anniversary for Islam's Prophet Muhammad in Egypt. It is usually a vacation where families celebrate with gatherings and by listening to or reading the Quran. A main part of celebrations is buying and eating together the anniversary sweets. These are a mix of traditional sweets made from different types of nuts mixed with butter or honey and plenty of sugar. But as Yasser Hakim reports, there's been a small twist in this year's sweets.
Every occasion in Egypt has its special food, and for this one is the Prophet's anniversary sweets. There are sugar-made dolls and horses for the children and the sweetened mix of nuts. They've been extremely popular with families for decades, but are far from healthy, with the heavy glucose, sugar and butter along with artificial ingredients. The growing awareness and demand for healthy food lately in Egypt prompted Mohammed El-Turki and his partners, who own a supermarket chain, to tap this segment.
Many of the clients now care about the health aspects. No one ever used to look at the ingredients and nutrition facts written on the pack. It never crossed their minds. These days, however, it has changed, especially after the coronavirus pandemic. The health aspect is a priority for clients. Therefore, we put this into consideration in our products.
And hence the supermarket introduced the first healthy anniversary sweets in their 30 branches around the country.
It was a big challenge because most of these products are made from sugar. We worked with the R&D team to produce anniversary sweets made out of honey. We managed to make 7 types of anniversary sweets with different types of nuts, sesame brittle, cashew produced with healthy honey like this one. Other sweets were made from keto diet with stevia.
He says it required some work to replace the sugar and gluten components without affecting the taste and at affordable prices. The sales plan has focused on online marketing and home deliveries because of the coronavirus pandemic. However, there are walk-in clients too.
I started a sugar-free diet a year ago. I had a problem. I wanted to eat the anniversary sweets, but I couldn't. Finding the sweets made of natural honey is very appropriate. The taste is still good and healthy.
Although the first year has been seen as a testing period for the team, so far the demand is very encouraging to give it another go next year. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports, Olympic flame arrives in China for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find